The best way I know how to approach this celebration, and especially the gospel that we have just heard, the first two readings full of the glory of the Lord lead up to the climax of the liturgy of the Word, which is the passage from the gospel. And Jesus is presented here as king. What kind of king? He's standing before an unjust judge who's about to condemn him to death for what he has done. What he has done is, as he says, is to bear witness to the truth which in the world, then as now, is so badly mistreated. Jesus is about to be condemned to death precisely as king. There's another passage in the gospel that reveals exactly what is going on here when Jesus stands before Pilate. Jesus was passing through a certain town and he performed a miracle. He healed someone, and the whole town was in an uproar of delight. This is wonderful. This great wonder worker has come among us. And what happens? The text of the gospel says, and then he fled. He ran away because he was afraid they would come and make him king. So Jesus wants nothing to do with the kingship of this world. If we celebrate Christ as king, it's the one who stands there at the moment before his death, stands robed not with the glory of the heavens, but with nothing but his own human dignity. And that is what connects us to Christ the King. The dignity of his humanity, of his justice, standing before an evil man, representative of the greatest empire in the history of the world. And Jesus, alone, abandoned by his closest friends, stands there clothed in the majesty of his humanity, of his human dignity. Martin Luther King, as a matter of fact, brought an idea into our thinking. He called it nobodiness. Nobodiness. The powerful people, like the white men who brought slaves over from Africa, like those who separate children from their parents today, those who have put in jail more people than anybody else on earth, those people think of the ones they are attacking as nobody. If you're a slave from Africa, you're nobody. If you're trying to get to the border of this country to find some refuge from death and destruction, you're nobody. But Jesus, clothed in the majesty of his humanity, says, yes, you are somebody. You're not nobody. You have the power and the dignity of a human being. And that is summed up in the person of our Lord. All of the glory that comes after his death, the resurrection, coming on the clouds of heaven, depends upon this one thing: his humanity and the dignity of that humanity. Next week we'll begin our preparation for his coming into the world. And he says here, as he is about to leave this world, this is the reason I came into the world, to bear witness to the truth. That's something to think about in the coming weeks of Advent. There's a lot of external stuff connected with the coming of Christ, but the most important thing about him is he bears witness to the truth, against the lying and the evil and the slaughter that human beings inflict on one another. Jesus stands before us as the King of the world, that is, of humanity, not of this planet which we are destroying on our own, not of the heavens, the glory of nature, but the one who bears witness to the truth. And again, that is what connects us with Christ our King. the one who is deprived of every human external, alone, abandoned, about to be put to death, but stands in the glory of his humanity. What a tremendous gift we have to be united to this Christ, the Christ who gives himself in generous love for others. The kings of this world, whether they're called kings or presidents or prime ministers, whatever it may be, they have physical power. They can destroy other people. They can destroy other nations. But they don't have the power of Christ, who stands in his humanity before us and before God, before all the world and before all those who listen to his voice. We come here this morning because we are listening to the voice of Christ. Sometimes it's drowned out by the world around us. Sometimes it's drowned out by our own church, the evil things that can happen in this church like any other institution. But we come here today because we are listening to the voice of Christ. That voice resounds in our hearts. It reminds us of the dignity that we have as human beings. And that's why today we celebrate this Eucharist, this Thanksgiving. The other day we celebrated our secular feast of Thanksgiving. But every Eucharist is a feast of thanksgiving. And we celebrate that Thanksgiving today in the person of Christ, our King, who gives his kingship of peace and love to us, and we hope through us to all the world.